Has Israel become a divisive issue in Europe? The Dutch foreign minister has resigned after failing to secure sanctions against Israel. Many European countries have broken their silence about the war on Gaza, but can they make a difference on the ground? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. Earlier this month, Slovenia joined Spain and Belgium in imposing an arms embargo on Israel. Germany followed suit, halting the sale of weapons to Israel that could be used in Gaza until further notice. The Netherlands has also imposed a partial ban on parts for Israeli fighter jets, while Italy suspended all new military exports to Israel in October. But it's the recent resignation of the Dutch foreign minister after his government failed to sanction Israel that raises questions. Will this one action trigger a broader political fallout across the 27-nation bloc? Could more European governments buckle under the strain of mass protests against the genocide in Gaza? Or is Europe unlikely to change course? We'll delve into those questions in just a moment, but first, Michael Appel reports.
Israeli missiles rain down on north and central Gaza as its military flattens neighborhoods, blowing up buildings, killing civilians and displacing tens of thousands of starving Palestinians. The United Nations has officially declared famine in Gaza City, just as the Israeli military begins a major offensive to seize it. That decision drew criticism from some European members of the UN Security Council.
We condemn the government of Israel's decision to further expand its military operations in Gaza. This plan risks violating international humanitarian law.
But growing frustration has seen hundreds of thousands of people protest on the streets of European capitals. Capitals where some governments condemn Israel's assault on Gaza, yet continue to arm and support it economically.
But all the time they talk. We will meet, we will cut, we will break. But in the end, there is nothing in the land in Gaza.
For the Dutch foreign minister, a former ambassador to Israel, the time for talking was over, and he quit. Casper Veldkamp says Israel's actions in Gaza and the occupied West Bank are diametrically opposed to international treaties. His resignation, while appearing significant, could be too little too late for the Netherlands.
The fear is that it will allow the caretaker government between now and the elections, which will take place at the end of October, to continue business as usual, because they can still muster a majority in parliament against any harsh stance towards Israel.
The Dutch parliament has rejected attempts to sanction Israel and calls for greater pressure on countries hosting Hamas leaders. Is the mood in Europe shifting, though? Israeli defense contractors have been barred from attending the Netherlands' largest defense exhibition in November. Israel also faces increasing international scrutiny for its offensive to seize Gaza City. But this fragmented opposition seems unlikely to change the bloc's policy on Israel. And without a unified European response, any widespread criticism of the Israeli military's actions is likely to be subdued. Michael Appel, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests. From The Hague, we're joined by Mpanzu Bamenga, a member of the Dutch Parliament and human rights lawyer. And from Alpbach, Austria, we're joined by Rene Wildangel, a Middle East analyst and former foreign policy advisor to the German Parliament. Welcome, gentlemen. Mpanzu, let's start with you. What are we to make of the Dutch foreign minister's resignation? A principled move, perhaps, but ultimately what difference is it going to make, especially there in the Netherlands? Too little, too late. Could it in any way Probably not, I have a feeling you're going to say, set a precedent for accountability across the continent where governments fail to act on sanctions or international law.
Yeah, so let me first say that my heart goes out to all the people who are suffering in Palestine and also in the diaspora all over the world, because what is happening right now is genocide, and people are starving from starvation, which is used as a method for warfare. The bombing of the hospitals, the execution of aid workers, the killing of children, the erasing of the Palestinian history. It's really the most terrible thing that I've ever seen. And operations built on lies will never last. Justice will always prevail. The people of Palestine, they will be free. And this is the sound that you hear from our society. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Casper Veldkamp, has not been doing anything for quite a while. And now he was finally shifting towards doing something, because our society, I think the half of our society is basically saying that there is a genocide committing by Israel to the people of Palestine. So he finally wanted to do something, but he didn't find any any movement basically within his coalition, and they didn't give him the opportunity to actually come up with new measures towards Israel. And that's why I think he said, well, then I have to resign because I don't want to be responsible for what is happening right now.
Rene, we'll talk specifically about Germany in just a few moments. But first of all, policymaking, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens under pressure. Right now, Europe's streets are sending a very loud message, as we saw in Michael's report. Are the bloc's politicians listening? If not, why not? And what are the risks of them not doing so?
Well, I think, yes, they are listening and the numbers have been growing. We also have to see that in the first year, where the situation that the Member of Parliament just described, which is absolutely horrific now, already was terrible a year ago. And basically shortly after 7th of October, when this military offensive started in November. But still, I think it took some time until people digested this, until they went on the streets. We have seen in The Hague, for example, huge demonstrations with 100,000, 150,000 people attending. In Berlin, it was 50,000, for example. Numbers are still lower, and it has been growing slowly. I think politicians listen, and it is crucial that people go to the streets. What I've seen in Berlin and many of those protests, there was a lot of police violence, a lot of rigid legislation around it. I think a lot of people were confused for a long time. They were also not really sure what to believe. But now the situation is crystal clear. We've just seen the new UN report that was mentioned declaring famine in Gaza. And I think now really a large amount of the population understands what is going on. And even on mainstream television, you would see the images of starved children. So the numbers are growing. And yes, I think politicians do listen. They will listen. And the attempt by the Dutch foreign minister is an example for this. But they're moving very, very slowly. They're moving too slow, especially if we regard the horrific situation on the ground.
Mpanzu, why is concerted action against Israel so hard for Europe's politicians to agree on? What does it say about Europe's moral compass?
Well, it's hard because you just asked the question, and of course I'm a member of parliament myself, and I'm not really seeing a lot of movement. Yes, the movement is very, very slow, but there is not a lot of movement. If you see the comparison, what is happening in society. I remember in October 2023, when I went to demonstrate, we were like 6,000 of people. And there were a lot of people of color, but there were not a lot of white people, actually. But just a few months ago, there were more than 100,000, 200,000 people on the street. And from all colors, white people, colored people, all of them were on the street. And in the Netherlands, it was a record of people demonstrating on the street for such subject. So you see that, the society is really changing. The society is really demanding measures, but that is not happening in Parliament. And I think that the majority of Parliament, is still following the agenda of Israel. And we see it because we also had a report of a national coordinator for security and counterterrorism, who basically said that Israel is influencing the public opinion, is trying to influence the public opinion. And we also, as Parliament member, also receive sometimes reports who are influenced by the Israeli government. So all of this, and also some parties, they have religious reasons why they are not following what is happening in society. And I do believe that also racism plays a role, because if you look at the people who are suffering, the people who are dying, these are black-brown lives. And I do believe that black-brown lives somehow matters less to people. And this is horrible to say, and this is a horrible thing, but this is actually what is happening. There's a double standard going on here, and I think it's very dangerous for our international law and our international community. So we should really make sure that nobody and no state is above the international law.
All right, Rene, I'm picking up on what you were saying a few moments ago. Latest polls show 80% of the German public support tougher sanctions on Israel, and there's majority support for Palestinian statehood. The political class in Germany, though, absolutely unwilling to take any serious action. Why has it been so difficult in Germany to voice even minimal criticism of Israel?
Well, it's a very good question, and I have to say that at this point in time, almost 2 years of this military campaign in Gaza that has been described as a genocide by all major human rights organizations, the widespread policy of starvation that we have seen, that is crystal clear what is happening on the ground. And it's really not very easy to answer the question that you just asked me, because everybody, including those politicians, see the images from the ground. This is rooted in an older policy, and famously, Chancellor Merkel in 2008 declared the security of Israel as Germany's Staatsräson, raison d'etat, a central pillar for German foreign policy. Now, of course, this is connected to the German past, and I am a historian myself. I think there are a lot of things that we need to take away from the Shoah, from the Holocaust, from the German history, and that is to prevent mass atrocities. That one of the key lessons, I think, after the Second World War was the respect for international law, for human rights. And unfortunately, it was narrowed down to solidarity with the state. And now we have a state that is run by an extremist government, and it's a government that says very openly what it wants. And everything that it wants is 100% opposed to what the European Union expects from Israel. It's going on with the settlement policy. It's going on with those genocidal policies in the Gaza Strip. So I think it is really, really hard to understand why this movement is so slow. You have mentioned before that the German Chancellor, he finally did a step. He declared a partial arms embargo on weapons that could be used in the Gaza Strip. But when he made this decision, he came under fire from politicians in his own party. And unfortunately, I'm not very hopeful that Germany is moving in the right direction here.
All right, joining the discussion now is Ori Goldberg, a political commentator and author. Good to have you on the program with us, Ori. We're talking about the resignation of the Dutch foreign minister who failed to get sanctions implemented against Israel. How will that resignation have been seen in Israel?
Oh, it's just another link in a chain of global hatred and animosity towards Israel that's not really rooted in anything Israel does, but is as ancient as, the world itself. So the Netherlands, as far as Israelis are concerned, has been a site of demonstrations against Israel, of anti-Israel rhetoric, and frankly, Israelis will not be surprised because at the collective stage in which Israelis find themselves at the moment, they expect any and every place to erupt simultaneously with demonstrations and condemnations. And any place that does not do so is received with surprise and a conviction that says, well, okay, they're actually with us. We are doing the right thing. So nobody will be surprised, but nobody will make a great deal of it.
Ori, we've been talking before you joined us about the disconnect between public opinion, particularly in European society, and government policy. Apart from people in Israel demanding the release of the captives in Gaza, what's the mood among the Israeli public about their government's actions and the threat of sanctions or other economic or cultural measures being imposed upon them by, for instance, a bloc like Europe?
Well, I think it's really important to emphasize that I would say a real majority, a sizable majority of the people who are calling for an end to the war and for the return of the captives don't necessarily oppose the government's genocidal policies. In fact, I think it's the opposite that's true. I think there's a real majority among the Israeli Jewish public that supports the Netanyahu government's policies, even as it vehemently dislikes Netanyahu himself, even as it doesn't trust Netanyahu's government ministers. But all of their actions are understood by those who don't like them within Israel as matters to be dealt with internally, as issues to be fought over in a domestic internal war. This isn't about the Palestinians. This isn't about Gaza. And while a lot of Israelis are becoming more and more aware of what's being done in Gaza, I think a lot of Israelis would, in different ways, some eagerly, some reticently, some just by looking the other way, they would sign on to what you hear from the Israeli propaganda machine. Slogans like, there's no famine, there are only hungry people, or the whole discussion about whether the Palestinians who died of pre-existing conditions or of hunger, the whole issue of invading Gaza and so on and so forth. The great majority of Israelis support the most meaningful aspect of this government's policy, which is the genocidal campaign that has been going on for nearly 2 years. As far as coming to terms with what's happening in the world, in Europe, again, this isn't a surprise to most Israelis. They were expecting this to erupt. I think the best way of explaining this from an Israeli point of view would be to say that October 7, 2023 did not transform Israel, but it flipped Israel. In many ways, our collective id changed places with our collective superego. The quiet parts that we had learned not to talk about, that we had learned not to think about, the occupation, the oppression, the apartheid, the knowledge that the only democracy in the Middle East was surviving by maintaining a full-fledged military dictatorship in its midst, all of that was the quiet part. October 7th flipped that balance around. Now, everything that was quiet, repressed, down in the murky shadows of the collective psyche became the norm, became the thing that everybody said overtly. And since that is the case, the long-held suspicion that the world hates us because we're Jews, that anti-Semitism has never gone away, that it doesn't matter what we do, we will always be reviled for it. That is now also not the quiet part anymore. That is said out loud. So Israelis understand that things are going to be bad, but they don't feel like they can do anything about it. And in many ways, the most horrible aspect of being a part of Israeli society is this sense of resignation. Yes, our prime minister is a vile character. His ministers are annoying or unprofessional or whatever, but this is what it is. If we ultimately have to go occupy Gaza again, we'll do it because the state calls. It's what you have to do.
Mpanzu, feel free to come back on anything that Ori was saying there, but as we know, famine has been declared in Gaza. Men, women and children are dying of starvation because of deliberate Israeli policy. They're being shot dead as they queue for food aid and continue, of course, to die in Israel's indiscriminate bombing, which has already killed more than 62,000 people. Why the lack of urgency from the EU and many of its member states. Why isn't the EU, with whom Israel does more business than the US, taking concrete action against it now, when it can act swiftly enough over countries like Russia or Venezuela?
Yes, well, I do believe it's all because of the relations and also the history that Europe has with the Jewish people, and also what happened in the Second World War. And we always said that people feel guilty as well about what happened there, and we always said that this will never happen again. This will never happen again to Jewish people, but this will also never happen again to anybody else, to any human being anymore. And this is actually where we are lacking as an international community, because we are seeing conflict everywhere in the world, such as Sudan, such as Congo, where I'm originally from, but also in Palestine, and we are seeing genocidal. A lot of things are happening over there. So, but we are not acting like we should. We are not acting as we promised. We promised that this will never happen again, but this is happening live on television, and a lot of people in the Netherlands are being traumatized because of what they are seeing, and the lack of action from our government, but also from Europe. And I think that, for instance, the Netherlands is one of the countries that is investing a lot in Israel. And I do believe when you are investing a lot and you have such great relations, you have a greater responsibility as well to speak out. To speak out when a country is doing wrong to people. And I think that we have the responsibility as an international community to speak out, even though those people or this government is by origin our friend. It is even more important to speak out, because humankind is really in danger, and we should not let this slip, let this go in such a way. And I also heard about what the previous speaker also said. And my question is actually, what can we do as member of parliament to put more pressure to the government of Israel, but also to support those people who are not in favor of this policy? What can we do as an international community?
Okay. Rene, the EU then and its constituent nations wringing their hands, but mostly standing idly by, will they at least protect institutions like the ICJ and the ICC, who are facing sanctions, of course, from the Trump administration for indicting Netanyahu and trying to hold Israeli officials accountable?
Well, I would say they need to. You were asking about the moral compass before. And I think Europe has lost its moral compass in this issue already quite a while ago. And there's a huge fallout for this. I'm sitting here in Altbach Forum. It's a forum that moves around the key question: how can we rebuild European strategy, European sovereignty, defend Europe, European democracy, and so on. And yes, there is one panel on Gaza, but it is not seen as an existential question here. And the European Union, at least it claims that it is built on human rights and international law. That's a core point in the European acquis. The European Union has been growing in this, and all those great lessons from the Second World War and all the great speeches that we had. And now I really think this moral compass has been lost. And that's a huge problem for Europe if it wants to act in the world. And there are clear double standards, as we have mentioned before. If we look at Ukraine, Russia, and if we look at Palestine, and if you ask why, I have to say I only have partial answers as well. I mean, racism was mentioned as a motive. I very much believe that as well. Obviously, Ukrainians are somehow seen more as human beings that need to be protected as Palestinians, who happen to be Arabs and Muslims, and there's of course a mixing with migration debate that has gone very, very toxic in Germany and many other countries, the fear of Islam. And I think, yes, it's a key question, it's a key point to protect this international system. And we have President Trump that is supporting the extremist policies by the Israeli government, is trying to disrupt the whole international system. So if the EU does not stand up for those courts, if it does not stand up for the United Nations in an age of disinformation on attacks of this international system that we once built, I think it's losing its relevance.
Rene, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're almost out of time. Ori, the EU for the past 3 decades has advocated for human rights and integrated human rights protections in trade agreements, including in the EU-Israel Association Agreement. But it seems that when it comes to Israel-Palestine, there's this double standard going on. Is Europe, do you think, at risk of becoming irrelevant as a moral actor if it can't take a clear and unified stance on Gaza? What measures do you think might be effective against Israel?
Only proactive measures, and yes, I think Europe may have already become irrelevant in many ways. Europe needs to sanction Israel. I don't think there's any other choice. There's not any kind of public pressure that can be put on Israeli authorities by European parliamentarians or politicians that hasn't already been tried before. And all of that is augmented and complemented by the fact that Israel is very blunt and very overt in its disdain, in its contempt for those shared European values. Israel is very clearly saying, never again is for us, not for the world, not as a universal value. This cannot get any more open. It cannot get any more forthright. Israel is as honest as it can be in saying what it means and doing what it says. If Europe doesn't do exactly the same, if it doesn't back up its position in principle with real actions that are meant to stop Israel, not to convey discomfort, then I don't think there's anything else that can be done. And I think Europe is very, very much on its way to losing its relevance.
All right. Many thanks indeed, gentlemen. We're out of time. I really appreciate you being with us. Mpanzu Bamenga, Ori Goldberg, and Rene Wildangel. Thanks for watching. You can see the program again at any time by going to the website. That's at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us at our Facebook page at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, you can join the conversation on X, our handle there at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the team here in Doha. We'll see you again. Bye for now.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.